do now is actually override some of the functions that we set up. So we have the closed door and the open door. So under the functions section, there is the override to the right. You just want to have the two options in there. You should see an F for function with a little arrow, and that's just showing that you are overriding that function. When you open the functions, you should see the little orange node as well. And what that node represents is all the logic that's in the parent. So when we add anything, we just want to make sure that that is to the left-hand side, so it all gets called first. Okay, so I've just had a thought. So there isn't actually anything we do in here just yet. So we need to go back to the event graph, and this is in the child blueprint. And we need to create some functions for handling the door actually rotating and the handle. So I'll start with the handle. So I'm going to create a new event, so custom event. So if you just right click under the add event, there should be an option for add custom event. And I call this one anim underscore handle. And this is going to control the handle rotation. So when you first interact with the swing door, the handle will go down slightly before going back up, and then the door will open. So for this, we're going to use a timeline to drive that animation. So if you right click again, just type in timeline, and you want to choose the add timeline option. And I'm going to call this one TL, short for timeline, underscore door handle. Like so. And then you want to go ahead and open the timeline, add a new track of float, and I'm going to call this one rotation amount. And then we need to go ahead and actually set up how this would look. So I'm going to add 3 nodes. So you just shift click to add the nodes. Sorry, points even is probably a more apt description. So the first one, that needs to be at 0. And then for the value, that's also going to be 0. So that's kind of like the start position. And then at the middle, so this is if it's most complete. I'm going to do that at 0.25, so that's what quarter of a second, and the value of that's going to be set to 1. And then for the final one, this is going to be at 0.5 for the time, and the value is going to be back to 0. I'm going to then select those nodes, right click and auto, and that's just going to smooth out that rotation. The last thing I want to do in here is just make sure that use last keyframe is enabled. So obviously we have the length set here, which is 5. We could change that to 0.5 if you wanted to, but generally if you just tick where it says use last keyframe, that'll mean that the duration will always be whatever the last frame is. So if you come in and adjust it, you don't have to keep going back up here to change it. Okay, so that's that complete. So if we go back to the event graph, we can then go ahead and start plugging this one in. So what we want to do here is from the anim handle, we just want to plug that into the play from start. So whenever this gets called, it'll always play this particular animation, as it were, from the beginning. What we then want to do is get the door handle, and then we want to set the relative rotation. And we can connect that up to the update pin on the timeline. Like so. What we then want to do is, from the new rotation on the set relative, I'm going to go ahead and do the select rotator node. And this will allow us to essentially lerp between 2 values. Oh, sorry, wrong node. It's not the select rotator, it's the lerp rotator that we need. My apologies there. So once we've got that node in, we can go ahead and plug in the rotation amount into the alpha. So this essentially goes from 0 to 1. So 0, it'll be just all of A. If it's 1, it'll be all of B. If it's 0.5, then it'll be somewhere in between. So just to clarify on that, that's the value that's listed in here. So that's the reason why we use 0, 1, and then 0. So in terms of the rotation values, these themselves would vary slightly depending on the individual meshes you're using. But for mine, I'm going to rotate the roll value by 30. So if I was to come into here and have a look, the roll by 30, so the handle will go down by that much, and then it'll return back up to the top. Okay, so that's that complete. So the next one I want to do is the actual door itself. So For this, we want to go ahead and add, go ahead and create 2 new custom events. So the first one's going to be anim open door, and then the next one, or the second one, is going to be anim close door. That's so. So with these, what we need to do is actually set the door state based on what it's currently doing. So if we right click in the event graph, we can go ahead and just get the open door variable, and we want to go ahead and set it. So we can pull, so we'll need 2 of these, so just connect one up to the open door, one up to the closed door. So if we call the open door, we want to make sure that open door is checked, and if we're closing the door, then the door open is going to be closed. Okay, so with that done, we want to go ahead and create a new timeline. So yet again, right click and then tap timeline, grab that in. And call this one TL underscore door swing. And we can go ahead and connect this up. So we want the open door to be on play, and then the closed door on reverse. So it's a little bit different to how we have it with the one above it for the handle, where it's always going to play from the start. This will always play from where it is currently. So if it plays all the way to the end, that's where it'll stay. And then, so we just reverse from that point, and vice versa. So with that done, we just need to go into the timeline and add a new float track again, so similar to before. And I'm going to call this one rotation amount. And the way that we're going to set this particular one up is a little bit different. So we want 2 nodes on this one. So the first one, that's going to be 0 and 0. And then this second one is going to be at 1 and 1. So it's going to be 1 second to lerp to that full value of 1, to the full open. If you want this to take longer, you can move it over. Just like, for example, 2 and 1. So that'll take 2 seconds. But for me, I just want it to be a 1 and 1. Again, I'm going to select both those 2 nodes and do auto, just so it's got a bit more of a curve. And then lastly, just ticking that use last keyframe again. Okay, so back to the event graph. So what we want to do this time is actually get the door itself. So we're going to get the door in, and then we want to set the relative location. The relative rotation. And I want to connect that to the updated. So because of the way we have all the other components, such as the handle back plate and the handle attached to the door, when we rotate the door, those will also move with it. And because this uses its relative location, it will still function as you would expect it to, without having to do any additional calculations. So for this one, we want to go and use the lerp rotator again, and plug in the rotation amount into the alpha. So for my particular use case, again, because of the meshes I'm using, on the B, so when it's open, that's going to be 100 on the Z. For yourself, particularly if you're using different meshes, or you want it to open not as far or further, then you can have, play around with that particular value. If you wanted to, you could even expose these to a variable, which you can then modify in the level if you wanted to. In this particular instance, I'm not going to do that. Try and keep it as simple as possible. Okay, we're nearly done the nearly done the swing door. So if we go back to the closed door function, what we want to do is go ahead and call the anim closed door, just like so. So that one's nice and simple. And then if we go to the open door, we want to do a few extra things on this one. So for this one, I'm going to call the anim handle first. So that's going to be the handle to go down. And then we're going to use the set timer by event again. And I'm going to set this to 0.25. So in terms of the door opening, it takes a quarter of a second to get to the full down state. And it's from that point that the door will then actually start opening. So that's why I've used that particular value. So if you're making it so the handle goes down slower or faster, you can adjust this particular value if you wanted to. So going back to the set timer by event node, you want to pull from the event input and then do the create event again. And then this time you want to call the anim open door. Like so. So this particular door should be working. So let's give it a try. So we'll drop into the level. Like so. But it's not. Okay. Yeah, so the reason why is because I've forgotten to set up the collision on the base. So if you just open up the base door again, what we want to do under the collision settings, we want to change the collision preset to custom and then just tick block on interact. And we just want to go ahead and do that on all of the meshes that we have in here. And that's just so the player can interact with the door from when they're looking at any part of this particular blueprint. Okay, so now it should be working, he says. Yeah, there we go. So as you can see, it says open, and then if we interact with it then opens the door. So that's so. So we can press and hold, and you'll see it'll sort of cycle through. The door handle does get a little bit funky. So what we can always do in the enable hit recheck, we can just increase that time. So say if we do 1 second. So you can't re-interact with this particular door for 1 second. As I mentioned, if you look away and then look back, then you can re-interact with it anyway. That's just the quirk of the interaction system. So yeah, so that's the swing door. Now, with it being placed in the level, there might be cases where you want it to be open to start with, which it doesn't currently do. So what we can do, if we go back to the swing door blueprint, and we can set a few things up on the construction script. So the first thing we can do is go ahead and get the door, and we want to set the relative rotation, so similar to what we did with the timeline. And then from the new rotation, we want to do the select rotator. So for the pick A on this particular node, we want to do the door open boolean, so we can connect that up. And then let me just double check what these values were. So for the door, okay, so it's 100 on the Z. So we just want to, so if the door is open, which would be A, so we just want to set that to 100. And then we can plug that in like so. Okay, so now if we go back into the editor and then we toggle the button, you'll see that the door will open depending on that particular state. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and leave the door open, and then we're going to test it, and we'll probably notice something a little bit strange happen. So if we go ahead and interact with the door, it just closes. Now the reason why is because the timeline that we're using doesn't know that the door's open, so it's still stuck at the beginning. So what we can actually do to fix this is there is this set new time, and this just sets the time on the timeline. So what we can do is go ahead and create a new custom event, and I'm going to go ahead and call this one set swing state. Plug that into the set new time, and then from the new time input on the timeline, if you just drag that over to the custom event, it'll create a new input pin. Then if we go back to the construction script, what we can then do is actually call that event that we just created, so set swing state. And then from the new time on the input there, we want to do the select float node. Select float node. And we can use the door open again for the input. So if the door is open, we want the value to be 1, which is it's fully open, and that's the time on the timeline. So again, if your timeline is longer, so say you've done it to 2 seconds, you might need to update this to 2 seconds as well accordingly. So now if we try and interact with the door, it'll close as you would expect it to instead of just snapping back to the beginning. Okay, so the last thing I want to just double check on this is the auto close. So I'm just going to enable that on this particular actor. So if we were to open the door and then walk away, it should close in 5 seconds. Yep, see, there we go. And if we was to open the door again but stay close to it, it shouldn't close at all. So we can just sort of stay here and move back and forth. And it won't do anything until we get far enough away. Yep, see, there we go. And again, it's not always a feature that people want, but that's sort of an idea on how you can set something like that up. So in terms of the doors themselves, that is set up. You know, that's how you would set up a simple swing door. But let's go one step further and show you how to do a slide door as well. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and I'm actually going to go ahead and just duplicate the swing door that we've got. I'm just going to call this one slide. Like so. So the reason why is just because some of these things are then already set up for us. We don't need to worry about. Particularly the construction script. Obviously we'll need to do a few tweaks. Okay, so with the slide door, the first thing we want to do is just update some of these meshes. So if you go back into the viewport, you can select the components and update what the blueprints would, the meshes would be. So I'm going to update these to the slide variants that I've imported earlier. Making sure I select the right ones. So the door handle slide back plate, and then the actual door handle slide as well. Okay, and they should be on there. Yep, lovely. So I'm just going to move these over slightly, just because they need adjusting. Just like so. Okay, so that's the that should be the visuals sorted out. So I'm going to drop that in the level. Just rotate that a little bit. Okay. So if we go back to the main blueprint, so if we go to the open door, we don't need to worry about the anim handle, so we can actually just delete that. And because we're not worrying about that, we don't need to worry about doing the timer for the function. We can just call that straight away. So we can drop in the anim open door for the open door. If we then go back to the event graph, we can just delete that entire section there, the anim handle route, just because we don't need that. The next thing we want to do is on the open door and closed door section. I'm just going to rename the timeline to door slide, and then just rename the actual variable inside to translation amount, just for consistency. And then what we want to do here instead of setting the rotation, we want to do its relative location. So we just delete the set rotation node and we do the set relative location instead. And we just get that back up to the update. And then from the new location, we want to use the lerp vector. So that's similar to the rotation one. You can just plug in the translation amount. For this, the slide door, it would move on the y-axis for me. Yet again, it's because of the meshes that I'm using, so you might have to tweak these accordingly. But for me, it would be 89 units. Okay. And then what we can do is we just need to go to the construction script and just replace the set relative rotation in here. Yet again, this is just so we can set the initial door state accordingly, depending on the door open variable. So with that done, we want to do the select a vector, and then plug in that door open variable. So that's 89, I believe. Yep, on the A section. Okay, just like so. And I believe that should be the sliding door setup. So if we come over to the sliding door, we can open that as well. That'll work. So as you can see, that's two very quick ways of sort of setting up a door. So lovely. So if there is one last thing I do just want to quickly go over, this is only applicable if you are using the interaction system that I set up. So you'll notice that if you are interacting with the door, but you don't look away, the text that's shown in the interaction prompt doesn't change to reflect the state of the door. So in this instance, it's staying closed regardless of whether it's open or closed. So there is a nice quick fix for this. So what we can do is if we open up the UI manager, so the actor component, you'll remember that on the event tick there is a function called show interaction prompt. So what we can do is make a few changes to this that will allow it to update accordingly. So I'm just going to move a few things around just to give myself a bit of space. So in terms of the current hit actor, we will be using this in a few more places. So what I'm going to do is actually promote that to a local variable. I'm just going to call this a hit actor. And that's just so we don't have to keep calling this particular function and doing the relevant checks. Just like so. And then we'll just update this to use that local variable. Okay. Okay, so what we need to do here, so if the interaction prompt is valid, so there's already one showing up on the screen, we need to check if the current text on there is matches what's currently on the actor itself. So if we go ahead and get the interaction prompt variable, so that's the widget, we can pull from there and get the interaction text. Which isn't visible, so if we just open it up, it should be, it's interact text. Yeah, so if we get the interact text, that's so, let's make a little bit more space. And then we can just copy the get interact text from the hit actor. We'll just move that up. And then we just want to compare these two to see if they are the same or not. So equal. I'm going to use the case insensitive just so the case itself doesn't matter. And then from there I want to create a branch and connect that up to the get interact text. If they are equal, there isn't anything we need to do. We can just plug that straight into the end so it'll do what it needs to do. If it is, we need to get the interact prompt and we need to actually set that text again. So we can set interact text. Get that back up to there. So we want to just pull from the get interact text node and that'll just update the text on that particular widget. Just like so. I'm just going to add a new reroute node just to tidy that up a little bit. Just like so. Add a reroute node there as well. Okay. There we go. So that should now update accordingly. So if we go back to the slide door, you can see there that it updated the text. And that should be the same with the swing door as well. So there we go. So the great thing about doing it this particular way, obviously we've got the base door, which you can create different types of doors from, and then you can then create children of, say, the slide door or even the swing door, and just have like slight variance in the meshes, or if you wanted to change the behavior altogether and create one from the base. So yeah, so that's how you could use the interaction system and how it would hook up into the door. So as you notice, we didn't actually do anything with the interaction system at all, and that's how nice a system like this can be. Because at this point, everything's handled inside the actors itself for the most part, other than just enabling the hit recheck that we did on there just to make sure you can interact with it again without having to look away. So hopefully you found this particular tutorial useful. If you did, be sure to leave a like, and by all means leave a comment. Let me know what you think. So yeah, thanks for watching. Take care.